Hello everyone, today I'll show you how you can make this spline path, spawning random path generated along a spline that you have drawn in the level. You can see every time I change the spline, the new path is generated with random features along the sides of the road, like trees or rocks, vegetation, and all of this path is based on this single level, and it's picking random objects from the level based on the logic that we create in the PCG. It's created similarly to the path in the Electric Dreams demo showed by Epic on the presentation of the procedural content generation framework. I have the Electric Dreams project downloaded here, and this is the level that they showed. If you download the project, you can get the project from the Unreal Marketplace. If you go to the Browse button and then scroll to the Unreal Feature Samples, it's the first one, currently Electric Dreams Environment. If you download it and open it, you see a couple of levels in the content folder. Open the levels folder, then the PCG, then breakdown levels, and open Electric Dreams PCG spline example. And it contains this path. If you edit the spline, it's regenerating the path. And it's using this level here to generate the path with random objects along the sides. You can see it's a very detailed path, and it's all created by this single level. We'll actually reuse some of their custom blueprint logic to not recreate everything. If you go to the PCG folder, then open the graphs folder, the spline example folder, and here you will find the spline example PCG graph. In this graph, they're using two custom nodes. First one is this copy points with hierarchy, and the next one is near the end, it's apply hierarchy. We need those two functions. I'll show you briefly the function here. It's not so complicated, but since they're already created it, we can reuse it instead of making it from scratch. It's just applying the values that you set in the PCG properly to the instance level with your geometry to have everything placed by the rules in your PCG graph. In the PCG folder, then the assets folder, then open the PCG custom graphs, and here you have the apply hierarchy and copy points with hierarchy, and I believe copy points with hierarchy will use this post copy points blueprint class. So if you select all of those three, you can right click, and then with asset actions you can migrate to your project by clicking this migrate button, then choosing the content folder of your new project, and this will move them so you can use them in your PCG graphs later. Now, when you go back to your current project that you exported to, you will have the same PCG folder, then assets, and then PCG custom nodes folder. Inside this folder, you will have the three exported functions that we'll use in the PCG graph. Leave them for now, and you need to create the level that you will spawn along the spline to create the path. I have created this desert style road for the example of the project. Let's quickly recap what you need to make sure to include in this level in order for the path to look good. I will hide most of the elements. First, start with the path. Don't make it too long, because in the corners and curves of your path you need to have not huge segments, so the path doesn't look choppy. It has a nice curve on it. So I have sticked with around 3 meters of length for the road. Also make sure that at the beginning and the end of the road you have the path lower than from the middle. In that way it connects better on the change of slope that you can have in your path when it's going uphill or downhill. Also make sure that the path is oriented along the x-axis. In the bottom left corner, the left axis is pointing into the direction of your path. Then at the side of the path, start placing elements to define the path shape. I have created these embankments on the left and the right, and then start to add extra objects that will be randomly placed along your side of your path. For example, trees. And to be able to spawn those objects randomly based on some logic on the PCG, you need to tag them. So select the objects that you're placing, go to the details panel, search for tag, and here in the actor tags section, let me delete this one, it will look like this by default. Click on the plus sign and then add the tag. So for all my trees I have a tag 3. I have 3 static meshes for the trees and they all have this tag. Then the next one is this small shrubs along the path, this one, and they have this tag as well. The next one is the small walks along the path, they have the tag small walk. I have the big shrubs here, they have the big shrub tag. And finally I have this big rocks element. I have 3 big rocks, this one, and this one, and they all have the tag. And when placing elements that will be randomly placed along the side of your path, make sure that they look fine by themselves. So here, if I hide 2 of the rocks, make sure that your path doesn't have holes in it or other problems with the geometry. Make sure that each one is placed properly. And if you want to randomize, for example, the rotation of the objects, make sure that when you rotate your object, it doesn't create any problems. This will be a problem because the seam would be visible. That's why you need to place the objects in such a way that they doesn't interfere with the proper rendering of your path. So after you have done this, you created the section of the road and you tagged all the objects that you want to place randomly along the sides of the road. Select all of the objects of your path. For me, because I created them in one folder, it will be easier to select by the folder. So select all descendants of this folder, then right click, go to level and create level instance. You can leave everything as default here. Here pivot type center min Z is important. Leave it like this. So save the level where you want in your project. I'll call it like this. And now this is a single object in your level. It's a level instance. You can edit it by clicking this edit button in the details panel or clicking Ctrl E. It will allow you to change the path if you want to make some changes later, but for now I'm happy with this path. When you create this level instance, in order to use it in the PCG graph, you need to do one more step. So go to your level instance where you have saved it in your project, right click on it, go to scripted asset actions and click on PCG level to PCG settings. This will create this PCG settings file for you, and you will need this to use in the PCG graph. So now let's create this PCG graph. I'll go here inside my PCG folder and into the tutorial folder. I'll create a new PCG path. So go to PCG graph, and I'll call it PCG Desert Paths, for example. I'll create a new blueprint that will use this. Right click here, create a blueprint class, make it an actor blueprint, call it BP Desert Path. Open the new blueprint, and inside the blueprint add a spline component that we'll use to draw our path, and also a PCG graph. And for this PCG graph, select the graph that we create, the PCG Desert Path. Compile and save this blueprint. Now, if I drag this blueprint into the level, let's create a longer path. Let's go to the Desert Path PCG that we created, and we'll sample this spline. So right click and choose the spline sampler, and for the spline we'll drag and we'll get spline data. The spline data will be taken from the blueprint. So for the actor filter, select self. This will refer to the blueprint that contains this PCG graph. This will select the spline and will place the objects based on a fixed distance of 300 centimeters. That's the length of my path. And now we need to use the blueprints that we copied from the electric dreams environment. First we'll need the subgraph. So right click and start typing copy points with hierarchy. And the next one, drag from this execute blueprint, and here select apply hierarchy. For this copy points with hierarchy node, we need our points that we want to copy to from the spline, and the points that we need to copy will come from our PCG settings level that we created earlier. So go where you saved your PCG level, and the generated PCG settings file is here. Drag it inside and select instance. Now, if I drag from the points to the copy point source, this will copy all the points for the objects in my dirt path segment into the points placed along the spline. Connect this to the apply hierarchy node, and after this we'll spawn static mesh spawner, and we'll select by attribute. The attribute name will be mesh. These two nodes are copying the path of the meshes and the materials, and they're copying the position of each of these meshes for our level and placing it along this spline. So if you go back now to the level, you see that at each 300 points we are spawning the level of the path, and it's following the curve that we draw. Now what we'll need to do is just to randomize this path a bit, and also to make sure that we are randomly placing the objects at the sides and we are not just placing them each time, because it's easily spottable that there is a repetition right now. We don't want that, we want our path to look more natural. So before copying the points into our spline, we'll want to randomize the path a bit by rotating some of the segments the other way. For this to work, before copying the points onto our path, we'll change a bit the position of the points on the path, disconnect this node, and after we sample the points each 3 meters, then we'll do a density noise. This will add a random value from 0 to 1 for the density on each point, and then we'll do a point filter. We'll filter the density. If the density is bigger than 0.5, let's check this use content threshold and put 0.5. So for half of our points, they are from 0 to 1, and we are only filtering the ones greater than 0.5. We'll want to transform points, and the transform will be that we'll rotate them 180 degrees in Z. And for the other half that is living outside this filter, we'll do nothing. So we'll just merge those points, the ones that we rotated and the other ones, and then we'll copy them to our static mesh spawner. Save this. And now the path is a little bit more randomized. Some of the pieces are rotated the other way. These rocks are on the left, and these ones are on the left, and these ones are on the right. So this is a good step into the variation part of our spawner. The other thing that we'll do is, after we apply the hierarchy, so we have the points, we have them placed along the spline, the individual points inside the level, after the copy points with hierarchy, and before the apply hierarchy, let's make some space. And here we'll place the randomization of each type of points into our level. So do it the same way like here. Let's disconnect, and now let's create a point filter. Into this point filter, instead of density, I will use big rock tag. I will again use the constant threshold, and this should be an integer, because if I have this tag on the points, they will have a value of 1, and the other way they will have the value of 0. So I just need to check if this one is bigger than 0 and the type is an integer. So all of the rocks will be filtered inside this node here, inside filter, and all the other points will be in the outside filter. So for the rocks, I'll apply a density noise, again from 0 to 1. Then I'll apply a density filter. Then, because I have 2 rocks on the one side of the road, I don't want them to place together. I want one or the other just to have a chance to be spawned. So I will do a self-pruning operation for the end. I'll transform the points to add a little bit of variation. So let's say I'll add some rotation to them. This way it will be a little bit more randomized. So by this logic, I'm using this node to not spawn big rocks on the same place of the road. And this one is determining how much big rocks I'm placing along the path. For now, around half of the objects will have this big rock. Let's test and see. We must first merge our big rocks with the other objects into our path. Let's use again this merge node and then connect to the end. And now, if you change the values in the density filter, you will see that you get more or less big rocks at the side of the road. Let's say we want, for example, 20% of our tiles to have big rocks on them. So we'll put the bounce from 0 to 0.2. So we don't have a lot of big rocks on the side. If it's too little for you, do a little bit more, 0.3 for example. And now we need to do that for the other types of objects that we have. For example, let's do it for the trees, because they are currently very easily potable that they're repeating into our scene. So we know that this part of the graph is only containing the rocks, and we are merging with the other parts here in the end into the merge node. Let's add a little bit more space here. Let's disconnect for now these nodes. I'll add a comment here, rock placement. And when we filter for our rocks, the trees are left outside in these outside filter points. So we'll do again a point filter, because this contains also the other types of objects like shrubs and the logs on the ground and the path itself that will not randomize at all. So we'll do a point filter. Here we'll put the tag 3. We'll use constant of integer. And now inside the filter we have the 3 points, and outside we have all the other points. So let's copy the same graph as for the rocks. We don't need the self-pruning, because I actually want the two trees that I have on top of each other sometimes to place together. This right branch of this tree, it's a separate object, and that way I'll make it look like a different tree with 3 branches from the base instead of the 2 ones from the original one. That way it will create a little bit more variation. So that's why I don't want to use the self-pruning node. I'll apply a density noise, then I'll filter some of the trees, and then I'll transform them. For the trees you can do a more extreme rotation. They will be rotated basically at any way they can be placed. So to this 360 degrees in total. So I'll merge the trees. Also, I'll merge the other objects that I'm not currently placing randomly, just to see the result. Now, I don't have a tree on each patch of the path. I have randomly placed the trees, and you can control this by the density. For example, if I want more trees, I can put 0.5 here. If I want less, 0.4, 0.2, 0.1. Let's say I want 0.3. and they are randomly rotated. I also can put some random scale for the trees. For example, I'll scale them from 0.8 to 1.5. That way I'll have some smaller and some bigger trees. Let's change the example to be a little bit easier to spot. Let's put 0.2 as a minimum. It's not scaling the trees properly because I have forgot one step. You can see that if I change the values, the trees are not changing. That's why, because I need to apply to an attribute. This apply hierarchy node is making sure that the transform is applied from this relative transform node. So into the transform points for our rocks and for our trees, I need to check the apply to attribute and then put this relative transform here. I'll do it for the rocks as well. And now I have this tree scaling from 0.8 to 1.5. Now let's continue with the next type of object. I'll add a comment here and say tree placement. The next one is the big shrubs along the side of the road. I'll copy everything here. I'll call it big shrub. I'll connect the outside filter to this filter, disconnect it from the merge at the end. So everything that is rock we are dealing with here on the top, everything that is tree here, the big shrub now will continue. Point filter we need to change to big shrub. And the same will be done for the small shrubs. Small shrub. And in the end for the walks along the path for a small walk. Connect each outside filter to the next point filter and then change the tag name. Small shrub and here small walk. Merge all of the results. And at the end merge everything that is left not filtered by these tags. And now you have a random placement of each type of the objects in the scene, and you can change every randomization variable here. And by these filters and the transforms you can control how are you placing the objects along your path. This setup is basically the same as the one in the Electric Dreams demo, but using more type of objects and placing them randomly along the side of the path to make it more random. What you can do if you followed the last tutorial, use this OrientPoint function. For the mesh length, I'll add 300 because that's the length of our piece. After we sample the points, we'll orient them with this function. This can help you a little bit with the slopes in your terrain. Let's disconnect and show you what's the difference. So if I have it connected by default, and if I add a point to the spline in the middle, let's add one at the end, and we'll use this one. If I add this point in the middle and I make my road curve a little bit up, there are some places that your road can show some disconnect. Let's try to break it, move it a little bit here, and now you can see I have disconnection from the two pieces of the road. The OrientPoint function from our last tutorial can help a little bit in this. So instead of connecting directly to the density noise, you can add in the middle this OrientPoint function. And if you remember from our last tutorial, for this OrientPoint function to work properly, we need to translate the path to be matching the beginning of the spline. So after we orient the points, we will transform the points and we'll move them half of the length of our path, so it will be 150 units. It's a lot better now. You can see the difference if I disconnect this OrientPoint and I connect it directly to the transform points. I have big problems with the slope, even if I don't translate the points. If I have it like it was by default, I have this connection here. So one thing that you need to address if you use these OrientPoint functions is that the way that we did it in the last tutorial, it doesn't take into consideration if you rotate the point, and if you want to have this path on a side slope and you want to rotate it, you can see that nothing is happening with the road. So into the OrientPoint function, we can make one change. Here where we setting the rotation for the point, we need to take into consideration the rotation in the x-axis, our current point. So get our in point. Let's break this point. Let's split the pin for the transform. Let's split the pin for the rotation. So this rotation in x-axis, I'll add to the rotation that we are creating here. So let's disconnect this. Let's split this pin and we'll add the x rotations of our point and our calculated rotation based on the positions of the other points. And after this, we will make a rotator and we'll connect the calculated y and z axis and connect this rotator here into the point that we are saving in the end of the function. You can organize it a little bit better, but you can see what's the logic here. So we are just using the x rotation of the point into our last resulted rotation that we created for the point. So compile and save this. And now if I go back here, when I rotate the path, it will generate properly the slope angle that you set in the spline. In this way, you can easily add paths to your level. They will look random. You can control how much trees and how much of the big rocks you have. You can add more categories that you put random objects based on the tags. And with the OrientPoint function, it will make sure that you don't have disconnection on the slopes. If you see pieces like this, you can just rotate the point slightly to fix it. This will be the previous point. Now everything is back to normal. You can easily populate your level with natural looking paths. If you liked this tutorial, please like and subscribe the video. If you have any questions, write in the comments. And if you have ideas for new tutorials, please also write in the comments as well. And see you next time. Bye.